The undeoriestimation. The Kelveri hegemony had ruled the central arm of the galaxy for over 3 millennia. Their vast fleets, massive behemoths of crystalline alloys that shimmered like frozen stars, patrolled trade routes with impunity. Their warships, some stretching 20 kilometers from bow to stern, housed weapons that could crack moons and vaporize oceans. The Kelveri themselves were a species evolved from apex predators, tall, elegant beings with iridescent scales and eyes that reflected the cold calculation of natural selection's ruthless design. Admiral Thexlar stood on the command deck of the Voice of Dominion, the hegemony's flagship and pride of their grand armada. His scales rippled with barely contained amusement as the communication officer replayed the message from the newly discovered species that called themselves humans. They wished to join the galactic concord, the officer reported, mandibles clicking in what passed for Kelveri laughter. They've sent specifications of their largest vessel as a gesture of good faith. Thexlar's inner eyelid slid sideways as he studied the schematics. The human ship was barely half a kilometer long, what they apparently considered a heavy cruiser. Its weapon systems relied on crude kinetic projectiles and primitive fusion reactions. The design was utilitarian, almost brutish compared to the elegant Kelveri vessels. "How quaint," Thexlar said, his voice a resonant hum that vibrated through the crystalline deck plates. Another species that thinks strapping engines to metal boxes and hurling themselves into the void constitutes a spacefaring civilization. His senior officers joined in his amusement, their scales shifting through patterns of blues and purples, the Kelveri equivalent of hearty laughter. "What shall we tell them, Admiral?" asked the communications officer. Thexlar considered for a moment. The hegemony's policy toward new species was typically straightforward: subjugate or eliminate. But occasionally, they allowed lesser races to serve as buffer states or labor forces. "Invite them to observe the grand exhibition next lunar cycle," he finally declared. "Let them see what true power looks like. Perhaps they'll be wise enough to accept protectorate status without resistance." The grand exhibition was the hegemony's most prestigious military display, a demonstration of naval might where allied and subjugated species were reminded of Kelveri's supremacy. It was part ceremony, part intimidation, and part war game. "And if they aren't impressed?" asked his second-in-command. Thexlar's mouthparts curved into what humans might recognize as a smile. "Then they'll learn the hard way." Captain Ilara Chen stood in her dress uniform on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, Earth's newest destroyer-class vessel. At 320 meters from bow to stern, it was hardly the largest ship in Earth's modest fleet, but it incorporated humanity's most advanced technologies, many of which remained carefully concealed beneath its unremarkable exterior. "Approaching Kelveri space, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Hassan at the helm. "Their escort vessels are hailing us." Ilara nodded, her expression neutral despite the butterflies in her stomach. Humanity had encountered several alien species since achieving faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. But the Kelveri were different, an ancient empire with technology far beyond Earth's, at least on paper. "Open channel," she ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a Kelveri officer whose scales shifted in patterns that their cultural briefing had identified as amusement or condescension. "Human vessel," the Kelveri began. "You will follow our guidance to the observation platform. Your ship has been granted special dispensation to witness the grand exhibition. Consider this an honor rarely bestowed upon species of your development stage." Ilara maintained her professional demeanor. "We appreciate the invitation, Commander. The United Earth Government values this opportunity for cultural exchange." The Kelveri officer's inner eyelids flickered, a gesture their briefings hadn't covered. "Exchange. There is no exchange here, human. You are here to observe and learn your place in the galactic order." The communication ended abruptly. Commander Raj Patel, her XO, moved to stand beside her. "Friendly bunch," he muttered. "They've dominated this sector for thousands of years. Ilara replied quietly. They've never had reason to be diplomatic. Permission to speak freely, Captain. Always, Raj. I don't like this. The way they dismissed our ship specifications without asking a single question. They're either incredibly arrogant or they think they already know everything about us. Ilara finished. Either way, it works to our advantage. The Admiralty's orders stand, Raj asked. Ilara nodded, her eyes fixed on the massive Kelveri vessels that now surrounded them, each one dwarfing the Indomitable like whales around a dolphin. We observe, we learn, we represent humanity with dignity, she said. Then, almost as an afterthought, and we keep our cards close to our chest. The observation platform was a crystalline structure suspended in space, offering a panoramic view of the vast emptiness where the exhibition would take place. Representatives from 24 species occupied various sections of the platform, each group keeping to themselves. Ilara and her small delegation were assigned a small viewing area at the very back, the equivalent of nosebleed seats at a stadium. The message was clear. Newcomers belonged at the periphery. Captain Chen. A melodious voice caught Ilara's attention. She turned to find herself facing a slender being with pale blue skin and large expressive eyes. The universal translator identified it as a Thraxi, a species known for their diplomatic roles. I am Cyril, third attaché to the Galactic Concord Diplomatic Corps, the being said with a slight bow. It is unusual to see a new species invited to the exhibition. We're honored to be here, Ilara replied diplomatically. Zeril's expression was difficult to read, but their voice lowered conspiratorially. The Kelveri rarely extend invitations without purpose. Have they discussed protectorate status with your government? They've made their expectations clear, Ilara answered carefully. Then I advise caution, Zeril said. The exhibition often concludes with practical demonstrations involving non-compliant species. Before Ilara could respond, a resonant tone echoed through the platform, and all conversations ceased. Admiral Thexlar appeared on massive holographic displays throughout the observation deck. Esteemed allies and honored observers, his voice boomed, though Ilara noted how the translator emphasized different words than what his mouth parts seemed to be saying. Welcome to the 731st Grand Exhibition of the Kelveri Hegemony's naval might. As he spoke, massive warships began to move into formation, crystal-hulled behemoths that caught the light of the system's star and fractured it into rainbows across their surfaces. Today, we demonstrate the pinnacle of martial achievement, the unmatched power that has maintained peace and order across this sector for millennia. The Kelveri ships performed a series of maneuvers, their movements synchronized with impossible precision. Energy weapons flashed between them in choreographed patterns, striking shield systems that flared with brilliant light but never faltered. Impressive display, Commander Patel murmured beside her. But it tells us nothing about their actual combat capabilities, Ilara replied softly. This is theater, not warfare. After nearly an hour of increasingly complex demonstrations, Admiral Thexlar's image reappeared on the displays. And now, as is tradition, we extend an opportunity for our guests to participate in a friendly exchange. His inner eyelid slid sideways in what Ilara now recognized as their version of a smirk. Would our newest observers, the humans, care to demonstrate their capabilities alongside a Kelveri training squadron? All eyes on the observation platform turned toward the Earth delegation. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. This was unexpected, though perhaps it shouldn't have been. She glanced at Patel, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. We would be honored, Admiral, she replied, keeping her voice steady. The Indomitable stands ready. A ripple of what could only be described as snickering moved through the observation platform. Excellent, Thexlar replied. A single Kelveri light cruiser will engage your vessel in a simulated combat exercise. Weapons will be limited to training intensity, of course. We wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents. As Ilara and her team hurried back to their shuttle, Cyril appeared beside them, moving with surprising speed for their willowy frame. "Captain Chen, this is highly unusual," they said urgently. "Even for the Kelveri, this is provocative." "Thank you for your concern," Ilara replied, not breaking stride. "You don't understand," Kxeril insisted. "The training intensity for Kelveri weapons is calibrated for their ship's defenses. Your vessel's shields may not." "We'll manage," Ilara cut in, then softened her tone. "But I appreciate the warning." Back aboard the Indomitable, the crew moved with practiced efficiency to battle stations. There was tension in the air, but also a strange sense of anticipation. "Status report," Ilara commanded as she took her place in the captain's chair. "All systems nominal," reported Lieutenant Rivera from Tactical. "Conventional shields at full power. Kinetic barriers engage. Point defense systems online. Engineering reports ready, Captain," added Patel. "All standard propulsion systems functioning within expected parameters." Ilara noted his careful wording. Standard systems, expected parameters, the coded language confirming that their special modifications remained dormant and undetected. "Communications from the Kelveri cruiser, Captain," announced the comms officer. They're requesting we power down to safety levels for the exercise." "Acknowledge their request," Ilara replied. "Inform them we're operating at standard cruise configuration as permitted under exhibition protocols." On the main view screen, the Kelveri light cruiser approached, a sleek, crystalline vessel approximately 3 times the Indomitable's size. Despite being classified as light by Kelveri standards, it was still an imposing sight. "They're scanning us, Captain," reported the sensor officer. "Extensive EM suites across all bands." "Let them look," Ilara said calmly. "Active countermeasures only against intrusive scans." The Kelveri commander appeared on screen, his scales shifting in patterns that their briefing had interpreted as amusement or disdain. "Human vessel," he began without preamble. "Our scans indicate your shields are barely sufficient for interstellar debris deflection. For your safety, we recommend you withdraw from this exercise." Ilara smiled pleasantly. "We appreciate your concern, Commander, but we'll proceed as planned. The Indomitable may surprise you." The Kelveri's scales flashed in what might have been irritation. "Very well. The exercise will begin in 60 seconds. Standard exhibition rules apply. First to achieve target lock with 3 primary weapon systems is declared victor." The screen went dark. "Tactical assessment?" Ilara asked. Lieutenant Rivera's fingers danced across her console. "Their weapon systems are powered to approximately 30% capacity, which is still enough to seriously damage our conventional shields. They're expecting this to be over in seconds. And their defenses. Standard crystalline lattice hull with energy dispersion field. Nothing we haven't prepared for." Ilara nodded. "Helm, evasive pattern Echo 3 once the exercise begins. Tactical, hold all special systems in reserve until my mark." A countdown appeared on the tactical display. 10, 9, 8. "Remember," Ilara said to her bridge crew, "we're not just representing the Indomitable today. We're representing Earth. 3, 2, 1. The Kelveri cruiser opened fire immediately, a dazzling array of energy beams converging on the Indomitable's position. In the observation platform, gasps and murmurs rose from the assembled dignitaries. The attack was far more aggressive than the training exercise warranted. But the beams struck empty space. The Indomitable had moved, not with the crude burn of conventional engines, but with a flickering shift that defied the expected laws of physics. One moment it was directly in the path of the Kelveri attack. The next, it had appeared 2 kilometers to starboard. On the Kelveri cruiser's bridge, confusion reigned. "Impossible," the commander hissed. "Target that vessel. Full tactical spread." Again, energy weapons lashed out. Again, the Indomitable wasn't there when they arrived. On the Earth ship's bridge, Ilara allowed herself a small smile. "Micro jumps functioning within parameters, Captain," reported the helm officer, her voice steady despite the exhilaration of executing maneuvers no other species had mastered. "Let's not show all our cards at once," Ilara said. "Standard evasive maneuvers for the next sequence. Prepare conventional countermeasures." The Indomitable switched to conventional thrusters, moving in a predictable, if skillfully executed, evasion pattern. The Kelveri cruiser adjusted quickly, its weapons finding their mark. Energy shields flared around the human vessel. "Shields holding at 82%, Captain," reported Tactical. "Their targeting algorithms are adapting to our movement patterns." "Let them think they've got us figured out," Ilara replied. "Engineering, status of the prototype systems." "Primed and ready, Captain," came the response from below decks. "Capacitors at full charge." The Kelveri continued their assault, their confidence growing as they registered hits on the human vessel's shields. In the observation platform, most species watched with detached interest. The outcome seemed inevitable. Except for Xarl, who had noticed something odd. Despite taking hits, the human ship showed no signs of distress. No power fluctuations, no emergency venting, no erratic movement. It was almost as if they're letting themselves get hit, Xarl whispered to themselves. On the Indomitable's bridge, Ilara watched the tactical display with calculated patience. The Kelveri were following a predictable attack pattern now, convinced of their superiority. "Shields at 60%, Captain," reported Tactical. "They're beginning to target specific subsystems." "Time to change the game," Ilara decided. "Helm, execute jump pattern Bravo." "Tactical, bring special weapons systems online. Let's show them what the Indomitable can really do." The REVERSAL. Admiral Thexlar watched the exhibition battle with growing irritation. What had begun as a simple demonstration of Kelveri superiority was taking longer than expected. Yes, the human vessel was clearly outmatched, but it had survived the initial engagements through unexpectedly agile maneuvering. "Status report," he demanded of his tactical officer. "The cruiser reports multiple hits on the human vessel's shields, Admiral. Their defensive systems are degrading as expected," but the officer hesitated. "But what?" Thexlar's scales rippled with impatience. "The human ship is demonstrating unusual movement capabilities. Twice it has changed position in a manner inconsistent with conventional propulsion." Thexlar dismissed this with a flick of his clawed hand. "Sensor anomalies. No species at their development stage has mastered translocation technology." On the main display, the battle continued. The Kelveri cruiser pressed its advantage, its crystalline hull gleaming as it fired another barrage at the smaller human vessel. Then something unexpected happened. The human ship vanished entirely, reappearing instantly behind the Kelveri cruiser. Before the cruiser could react, the Indomitable fired. Not energy weapons or crude projectiles, but a tightly focused pulse that struck the cruiser's aft section. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The cruiser's crystalline lattice hull, renowned throughout the galaxy for its resilience, fractured along precise geometric patterns, not destroyed, but compromised in a way no Kelveri engineer had thought possible. In the observation platform, a hush fell over the assembled dignitaries. "What just happened?" demanded a representative from a client species. Xarl, the Thraxi diplomat, leaned forward in fascination. "They've used acoustic resonance against the crystalline hull," they explained, their scientific background evident, a precision attack targeting the fundamental frequency of the lattice structure. On the voice of Dominion, Admiral Thexlar's inner eyelids retracted fully, a sign of genuine shock. "Impossible," he hissed. "The resonant frequency of our hull matrix is a closely guarded secret." His second-in-command shifted nervously. "It appears the humans have deduced it, Admiral." Thexlar's scales darkened with rage. "Deploy secondary squadron. Disable that vessel immediately." On the Indomitable's bridge, the crew maintained their disciplined focus despite the success of their first strike. "Direct hit," reported Lieutenant Rivera. "Their aft shield generators are compromised, and we've induced a 17% structural integrity loss in their hull matrix. They're calling for reinforcements, Captain, the comms officer announced. 3 additional cruisers moving to intercept. Ilara nodded, unsurprised. They were never going to let this be a fair fight. Defensive posture. Prepare for multiple hostiles. Commander Patel moved closer to her chair, speaking softly. Captain, Admiralty protocols allow for full defensive capabilities if outnumbered. Noted, Commander, Ilara replied. Let's see how they respond to our initial demonstration before we escalate further. The 3 additional Kelveri cruisers moved with predatory grace, spreading out to surround the Indomitable. Their weapons powered up simultaneously, no longer at training intensity, but at full military capacity. They'd dropped all pretense of this being an exercise, Captain, Rivera reported. Those are live weapons locks. So much for Kelveri honor, Ilara remarked. All hands, combat stations. Disengage safety protocols on defensive systems. Prepare the Aegis array. Throughout the ship, previously dormant systems hummed to life. Beneath the Indomitable's unremarkable hull plating, metamaterials reconfigured at the molecular level. The Kelveri attack came as a coordinated barrage from all 4 vessels, a crossfire designed to leave no avenue of escape. Energy weapons powerful enough to vaporize small moons converged on the human destroyer. In the observation platform, several diplomats turned away, unwilling to witness the destruction of the human vessel. Vzarel, however, watched intently. The energy weapons struck the Indomitable, and something unprecedented happened. Rather than attempting to absorb or deflect the attack, the human ship's defensive system captured the incoming energy, containing it in a swirling luminescent field that enveloped the vessel like a cocoon. Energy conversion successful, Captain, reported the engineering officer, her voice tight with concentration. Aegis array at 127% capacity and holding. Ilara allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. Redirect power to the Helios lance. Target the lead cruiser's propulsion systems only. The Indomitable seemed to pulse as the captured energy was channeled into its primary offensive system. A brilliant beam, composed partly of the Kelveri's own weaponry, lanced out with surgical precision, striking the lead cruiser's engine section. The effect was devastating. The cruiser's propulsion systems overloaded instantly, cascading failures rippling through its power grid. Secondary explosions bloomed along its hull as emergency systems failed to contain the damage. In the silence that followed, the remaining Kelveri cruisers hesitated, their coordinated attack faltering. The lead cruiser is adrift, Captain, Rivera reported. Life support intact, but all major systems offline. The others are maintaining position, but have not powered down weapons. Open a channel, Ilara ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the command deck of one of the remaining Kelveri vessels. The commander's scales had paled to an ashen gray, a sign of shock or fear. "This is Captain Ilara Chen of the UES Indomitable," she began, her voice level. "What was supposed to be a peaceful exercise has escalated unnecessarily. We have demonstrated our capabilities while showing restraint. Your lead vessel is disabled, but not destroyed, and no lives have been lost. I suggest we end this confrontation before that changes." The Kelveri commander's mouthparts worked silently for a moment before he found his voice. You cannot threaten the hegemony. Our main fleet will. Your main fleet will find exactly what you have," Ilara interrupted. "Humanity came here in peace, despite knowing how the Kelveri view lesser species. We accepted your invitation in good faith. Remember that." She gestured to cut the transmission. "They're conferring with the flagship, Captain," the comms officer reported. "Maintain defensive posture," Ilara ordered. "But power up jump drive. If they escalate further, we won't wait for their entire fleet to arrive." On the voice of Dominion, Admiral Thexler faced a situation he had never encountered in his centuries of service. The human vessel, this insignificant craft from a newly spacefaring species, had disabled one of his cruisers and demonstrated technology that by all rights should be beyond their capability. "We should obliterate them now," urged his weapons officer, scales flushed with aggression. "Bring the full might of the fleet to bear." But Thexler had not risen to command the hegemony's forces through rash action. He studied the sensor readings from the battle, noting details others had missed. "The human vessel has not yet brought its full capabilities to bear," he observed quietly. "They disabled our cruiser with precision. They could have destroyed it. And their defensive system." He paused, mandibles clicking in thought. "It didn't just withstand our attack. It absorbed it." "What are your orders, Admiral?" his second-in-command prompted. Thexlar's inner eyelid slid sideways as he considered options. Pride demanded retribution, but wisdom counseled caution. "Signal the remaining cruisers to stand down," he finally ordered, "but maintain combat readiness throughout the fleet." "Admiral," his second questioned, clearly shocked. "This was meant to be an exhibition, not a war," Thexler replied. "And we have exhibited much to our guests today, have we not?" In the observation platform, the assembled representatives of the galactic community watched in stunned silence as the Kelveri cruisers powered down their weapons and moved to retrieve their disabled companion. Vizeril approached a group of senior diplomats, their voice low but urgent. "The implications are significant. If a single human destroyer can stand against multiple Kelveri cruisers, then the balance of power in this sector is no longer as clear as we believed," finished an elder Morvian diplomat, their crystalline exoskeleton chiming softly as they shifted position. "The Concord may need to reevaluate humanity's petition for membership," suggested another. Across the platform, representatives from various species, many long subjugated by Kelveri dominance, exchanged meaningful glances. Something had changed today, and everyone knew it. Back on the Indomitable, the tension on the bridge slowly dissipated as the Kelveri vessels withdrew to a respectful distance. "They're escorting their disabled cruiser back to their main fleet," Captain reported Rivera. "No signs of additional hostile activity." Ilara nodded, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Stand down from combat stations, but maintain defensive readiness. I doubt this is over." Commander Patel approached her chair. "The Admiralty will want a full report. This wasn't exactly the low-profile observation mission they had in mind." "No," Ilara agreed, "but it served a purpose. Better to demonstrate our capabilities now, on our terms, than to be forced to reveal them in a conflict we didn't choose." The comms officer looked up from her station. "Captain, we're receiving multiple diplomatic requests for communication, not just from the Kelveri, but from at least 7 other species, including an urgent request from the Concord Diplomatic Corps," added Patel, checking his own console. Ilara allowed herself a small smile. "It seems we've made an impression." She straightened her uniform. "Put the Concord through first. It's time humanity took its place at the table." 3 days later, Admiral Thexler stood before the hegemony's High Council, his posture rigid as he delivered his report. "The humans possess technology beyond what their development timeline should allow," he explained. "Their defensive systems, propulsion capabilities, and weapons technology indicate either an unprecedented rate of innovation, or," he hesitated. "Or what, Admiral?" prompted the first counselor, her ancient scales barely shifting as she spoke. "Or external assistance," Thexler finished. "Though our intelligence has found no evidence of such." "Perhaps," offered another counselor, "we have been too comfortable in our supremacy, too certain that our path of development was the only viable one." The chamber fell silent, the weight of that possibility settling over the assembly. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" asked the first counselor. Thexlar's inner eyelid slid sideways in a gesture that, for once, held no trace of arrogance or amusement. "I recommend we extend formal diplomatic recognition to the United Earth government," he said, "and begin negotiations for their entry into the Galactic Concord, not as a protectorate, but as an independent member state." Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. "You believe they have earned this through a single military engagement?" asked a skeptical counselor. "No," Thexler replied. "I believe they have earned it through restraint. They could have destroyed our vessels but chose precision and minimal force. That speaks to a maturity we did not expect." He paused. "And frankly, I would rather have them as allies than as enemies." On Earth, in the chambers of the United Earth Defense Council, Captain Ilara Chen concluded her debriefing. "The Kelveri hegemony has formally invited Earth to join the Galactic Concord as a full member state," she reported. "Additionally, we've received overtures from 12 previously neutral species seeking diplomatic and technology exchange programs." Admiral Hiroshi Tanaka, head of the Defense Council, nodded thoughtfully. "All from a single encounter." "Sometimes the most effective statement is the one you don't have to make twice," Ilara replied. "And the Indomitable?" asked another council member. "Ready for her next mission, Counselor," Ilara said. "Though I suspect our days of being underestimated are behind us." Admiral Tanaka smiled. "Perhaps, but humanity has always thrived when facing challenges that others believed impossible." He stood, addressing the entire council. "We've earned our place among the stars today. Now we must prove we deserve it." As the meeting adjourned, Ilara found herself gazing out at the Earth through the chamber's vast windows. The planet seemed somehow smaller now, yet more precious than ever. Humanity had taken its first true steps onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals. And they'd done it not by firing the first shot, but by being prepared to fire the last.